Hello, hello, all you listeners out there on YouTube. It is us, Fat and Angry. He's fat and I'm angry. And we're doing another October special recording that's going to be coming out very soon. Right now it is the 19th of October. And it being October, we watched a nice little spoopy movie. A classic today. Frankenstein, the original, and The Bride of Frankenstein, courtesy of Fats, who picked up the Universal Classics Monster Collection. A very nice find.
Yeah, I for all the horror movies I had, I didn't have any of the classic monster stuff, and I found a neat box set at Walmart for $20, and it has 6 movies on it. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, and I forget what the last one is, but it's another one of the classics.
Wolfman?
I think I already said Wolfman, but...
Well, it's Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Wolfman. And The Mummy.
Mummy, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mummy.
so now to...
a lot of Boris Karloff, a little bit of Bela Lugosi, and a little bit of Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah, now I just need to pick up Creature of the Black Lagoon, and I'll feel I have like a sufficient classic monsters to round off my collection.
You'll have all the ones that showed up in Monster Squad, at least.
Yep.
All right.
But, yeah, so I'd seen Frankenstein before as a child because one of my teachers showed it to us, but I didn't remember a whole lot, so it was kind of like watching it for the first time again, and I'd never seen The Bride of Frankenstein.
I'd seen bits of the original Frankenstein a couple of years ago. My mom was watching one of those, like, we don't have cable, so it wasn't on AMC. It was on one of those in-between channels on the digital antenna.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you use the digital antenna, at least here locally, you'll get, like, there's channel 3, and then there's channel 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. And one of them's like Cozy TV or something. And sometimes they'll show Svengoolie, which is like one of the last, like, horror movie kind of, like, presenters that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Like, Svengoolie, like, of the theme of, like, Joe Bob Briggs or Elvira or, like, or Grandpa Munster. Like, any of those old, like, presenters, that used to present, like, horror movies, classic horror movies on TV.
Right.
And so he was watching a bit of that. It's amazing how much my mom didn't know of the story of Frankenstein for someone that claims to know everything about everything. But I only saw a bit of it. I didn't get to see it from the beginning, and I didn't get to watch it to the end. But so yeah, I love going back on classic movies. Even if I think the classic movie is garbage, I don't really know until I watch it. And so
So this was better for you than Cradle of Fear.
Yes, I was about to say, this was a whole lot better than Cradle of Fear, because this came out in the 30s and it doesn't have any excuses as to, like, the basic bitchery of the filmmaking. On that note, there was a couple of things I noticed based on the age of the film. For one thing, the first Frankenstein film came out the same year as Dracula, which is 1931. A long fucking time ago.
Nearly 100 years, if you think about it.
Yeah. And the second one was only 4 years after that, 1935. So yeah, these are very, very old fucking movies. And the first one, you can tell that this is like still the very early days of filmmaking. Granted, they have sound, but they hadn't really utilized a lot of it. One thing I noticed is I actually asked Fats over here as we were watching it, the first movie is so old that it doesn't have a musical track. It has music that plays in the opening and in the ending, like in both the credit sequences to bookend the movie, but there's no musical score for the movie.
Right, during the film, no music.
Yeah, there's no music whatsoever, which gives it a very eerie, quiet vibe.
Yeah, now, I usually don't pay a whole lot of attention to soundtracks in movies. Basically, it's very rare that something about the soundtrack will inspire emotion in me. But without a soundtrack, it was pretty interesting. It was noticeable.
Yeah, if you ever want to see something interesting, try watching your favorite movies, but try to find a cut that doesn't have any soundtrack whatsoever, and see how it makes the movie see how it changes the movie. Because nowadays people can't think of we get so spoiled with soundtracks, for lack of a better term, that we just come to expect it, which might explain why you don't pay attention to them. It just becomes second nature to you.
Right.
You watch a movie, you expect to hear music playing in the background, and for a lot of movies that don't have really, really good soundtracks, it's just background noise. Your brain tunes it out.
Right.
Or you just might be the kind of person that just doesn't pay attention to that thing and that shit in the first place. I pay a lot more attention to the background music, like the musical score, but if it's not good, if it's not great, I'm just going to tune it out.
Yeah, for me, unless it intensifies the scene for me personally, I tend to drown it out, and there's very few movies I can think of where it actually did that.
That was something I wanted to do an episode where we talked about movie soundtracks, but you're just so used to just tuning them out, you don't even pay attention to them.
Right.
It's like me, a lot of my favorite movies have really good soundtracks. I love Sphere. Sphere has a really fucking good soundtrack that really amps up every fucking scene. Alien 3 has one of the best soundtracks I ever fucking heard. I love the soundtrack and musical score for both Tron movies, particularly the original one. That crazy-ass 80s synth that plays in the first one. There's a lot of good movies that I can think of where the music really fucking sells the movie. But yeah, so The Bride of Frankenstein has a soundtrack. It's a very classic soundtrack because it was done in 1935.
Yeah, I don't really feel like the soundtrack intensified the mood of The Bride and Frankenstein, but after having watched Frankenstein, it certainly made the soundtrack a lot more noticeable.
Yeah, it's really a tough question which one has the better feel music-wise, because the second one does have a soundtrack, and it's a very classic monster movie soundtrack. When you think of classic monster movies, it's that's the first. It's the music that plays is very stereotypical.
Yeah, but at the same time, the pacing and the plot and just the overall feel of the movies is so different from each other.
Which is weird because they're both directed by the same individual.
Yeah.
I think it's James Whale.
Yeah, it's hard to say whether Bride of Frankenstein would have benefited from not having a soundtrack or Frankenstein would have benefited from a soundtrack. I certainly think during the creation scene of Frankenstein, some sort of jarring organ music would have been great.
But then again, it's not that I think that's a bad idea. It's that would be interesting to rewatch that scene with an organ soundtrack in the background. But without the soundtrack, it really does watching him put all this stuff together and yelling at Fritz, his assistant.
Yeah, there's nothing to distract you from what's going on.
It's it's really kind of creepy. It amps up the creepiness of it because you're just you're hearing the storm in the background. The storm is your background music. And you just hear them running back and forth. You hear the electricity going. You hear the slapping of them pulling the switches and metal slapping on metal, and the chains rattling and all just the sound effects. The people who were doing the sound effects back in those days, they had to be fucking good.
Yeah.
Because without no musical score, the sound effects really fucking stick out.
And I will admit this: the sound effects on both movies were better than Cradle of Fear.
The sound effects in most things are better than Cradle of Fear. The sound effects in Looney Tunes cartoons are better than Cradle of Fear.
Come on now, you don't have to shit on it anymore.
Yes, I do. I don't think I properly shat on it enough.
Alright, we'll do a shit-on sequel in a couple months.
Yeah, we need to do a video of just us hating on movies that we hate, which is going to be hard for you because you love so many movies. It's me, it's fucking easy. I can, without even having to think, I can name a few movies that, I would just love to see burn.
Well, let's see. I've got House of the Dead.
Most of Uwe Boll's stuff.
Everything by Uwe Boll. everything.
It's like, I don't even have to think about it.
Including Uwe Boll. By the way, anybody who sets Uwe Boll on fire in our fan audience, you get a free t-shirt. You need to send pictures and record the sound so I can sleep to it every night. You don't have to kill him, just got to set him on fire.
It's like, he can survive.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm fine.
Otherwise, how's he going to learn his lesson? A lesson that ends up with you dead is not a lesson learned.
Yeah. It's too late.
So anyway, let's just start with a plot synopsis, which is going to be kind of like running the numbers because most people know what the fuck happens in Frankenstein.
Spoiler alerts!
I know those of you that are like damn near 100 years old and like you've been planning to watch the movie since it hit theaters. You know, like our 99 to 110 like demographic. But so anyway, the first movie, you start off with it's not Victor Frankenstein. It's was it Herbert or Henry?
Henry Frankenstein.
Henry Frankenstein, which I don't know why they went without Victor, but whatever.
Well, what's funny is they have somebody in there named Victor, and so when
I think it's his father.
Yeah, when they start saying Victor, it's kind of like, wait a minute.
No, it's his professor.
That's
okay.
right.
Okay, so we start off with a funeral scene in like a really fucking ramshackle cemetery with like a straight up Grim Reaper in the background that you thought was just like a corpse stood up, right?
Yeah, it looks like they just, stood up a skeleton.
It was like,
I don't know if it was supposed
we'll just put this here. We'll bury him when we get to it.
Yeah, now I know for like those kinds of times that like sometimes criminals, their corpses either displayed or desecrated in such a way. So maybe that's what was going on there.
I think it was just a really good statue that didn't look like a statue.
But yeah, it could have just been the statue.
So anyway, we get and like you see like not 10 feet away like Frankenstein and his hunchback Fritz.
Because every good mad scientist needs a hunchback.
Which was funny. I've been reading a couple of Hackmaster books because they're fun reads. And like they talk about like golem constructors or like golem masters, like these enemies that just make golems. And it says that each golem master requires at least one, if not more, hunchbacks. Like you can't be a proper golem constructor unless you have at least one hunchback. And I'm like, are they fucking unionized or something?
Right, just go to the hunchback shop. I'll take that one. He looks like he's got a really good left arm.
It's like just an overly developed left arm's like dragging along the ground. It's just, I can just imagine like a fucking pet store, like behind like in the glass cases, like
pick me,
just jumping up and down, banging on the glass. Hey, over here, Malone!
I'll take the lady. You haven't had a real experience until you slept with a lady who has two spines.
Spina bifida, like you wouldn't believe. Anyway. Anyway, so like as soon as like the funeral's over and like after the Undertaker, who is the fattest unfit Undertaker I've ever seen in a movie, he looks like a frailer version of like the fat guy from Abbott and not Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, whichever one was the fat one. If you've ever seen a picture of Laurel and Hardy, like the two guys with the bowler hats, one of them is like gaunt and tall, and the other one's like morbidly obese with like the Hitler mustache. And like the fat one, imagine that guy but with really skinny arms and legs, but the same torso. And imagine him as like, there's no way in God's green earth this guy digs and like buries people for a living.
Yeah.
He is like just, he looked like he would have had 5 heart attacks just burying that guy.
Right, and the idea that he would finish in a nightfall is just ludicrous because as a fat person I can attest you got to take lots of breathing breaks and put ham sandwiches in between those breathing breaks, and he clearly didn't have a picnic basket full of ham sandwiches.
So like as soon as they leave, you see like Frankenstein and Fritz. They go and they unbury the corpse, and they go and they drag it off. And I'm thinking, wow, it's like being a funeral attendant. Caskets are fucking heavy, and this is like an old pine wood casket. So like, you see these two people like not just dig up this grave, but carry this box out with a body in it right after. I'm like, no, that shit's gonna be way too fucking heavy. It's like wood caskets are a lot fucking heavier than steel ones because the steel ones are just the outside skin and a very light frame that holds the body in place inside. Wood caskets are solid fucking wood, and even if it's like a ramshackle wood casket, it's gonna be fucking heavy.
Right. Like, just put 10 2x4s in your arms and tell me that's light. It ain't.
It's like, and you got like a body in it. So I mean, it's
gonna have wobbly weight.
So like, imagine there's a reason like you want to have at least 6 like good strong people as pallbearers when like you're carrying a casket. And so you see this doctor and a fucking hunchback like carry this thing out of a fucking hole. But anyway, enough of like me criticizing the physics of this movie.
Yeah.
So
we just got to assume that the hunchback's really strong.
He's got that extra hunchback strength.
Yeah.
And like no sooner are they taking off with this thing than like they go down the road and they find like just like you said like a convicted criminal who's been hung from a gallows like at a fucking crossroads for some reason. And I was like, dual purpose that shit. Put like a road sign on him. He's already there.
Right.
So like, and then they cut him down with a razor blade. It looked like. And like, Frankenstein looks at it, it's like the neck is broken, the brain's no good. It's like, unless you need like the whole fucking spine, it doesn't matter if the neck's broken.
Well, this was old times, so maybe they didn't know entirely how the brain works.
And so like, while Frankenstein goes back to the lab with the body, he sends his hunchback to go back to the college that he was going to go to his old classroom and steal himself a brain from his old professor. And this scene has been recreated a lot in fiction. I've seen even like Young Frankenstein. They have that scene where like he's supposed to get a normal brain, but he ends up with like a criminal brain, like an abnormal brain.
Yeah, he picks up the normal brain first, but something frightens him. I forget what, and he drops the brain, so he picks up the bad brain, and
it's like the thing is like it's old science. It's like, oh, a criminal brain. Like, you see the professor when he's giving the lectures, like the criminal brain. You notice like, the lack of such and such and like the frontal lobe and like, the signs of deterioration in like the upper frontal lobe and like this, the clear signs of a criminal murderous brain. Bullshit. Brains don't look like that.
Yeah.
A brain is a brain.
I remember this episode of Ripley's Believe It or Not where this one criminal specifically donated his brain to science because he wanted them to see if there was anything different about his brain, and they didn't find anything.
So yeah, it's a scene that's been lampooned and copied multiple times, but like it really serves no purpose. And you'll find out why as we go on. But so Fritz the hunchback makes off with the brain, and meanwhile they cut to we go back to Frankenstein's family home, which is this big ass castle, because you find out that his father is a baron, and he is the heir to the barony of Frankenstein, and he was also set to be married to his fiancée Elizabeth, and we find out through Elizabeth and standard male friend. Like, there's always that one guy. You notice that? Whenever there's, like, a movie, like, they had this in Dracula. They had this in, like, I've seen it in other movies. Like, whenever there's, like, a woman who's worried or distressed, there's always the male counterpart there who's, like, calm her down and, like, get her to, like, settle down. It's like, oh, settle down, you women with your emotions and your hysteria. You're just overreacting. Let a man take care of this. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's how those old classic old classic movies are. Old classic women, they had the hysteria, they did. Like, no, like a lot of fucking classic movies all had that trope. It's like it or not, that's how they did shit back in those days. And people believe that nonsense. But anyway, so like, she's freaking out because she's worried about Henry. and so they go to the college where they talk to Henry's old
Professor Victor.
Yeah, Victor such and such. But anyway, he tells them like, oh, Frankenstein, he's gone crazy and he's going down the path of evil with his horrible, like, inhumane experiments. He wants to create life. He wants to act like God. What a monster. That's like a big theme in this. It was a theme in the book. It was a theme in like both movies. The idea of like, how dare you try to create life? How dare you try to be God? And God's going to punish you for it. Because back in those days, religion was a big part of the movies. In fact, a lot of movies you couldn't even get like in the theaters unless you mentioned like Christianity in a positive light.
Yeah.
It's like I remember not a horror movie, but a science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, the old one from the 50s. They wanted to do the bit in the movie where the alien gets killed, but he gets brought back to life. And it was supposed to be that he gets brought back to life because his alien planet that he comes from is so advanced that they can revive the dead. But the censorship board wouldn't allow for that. So they had to change it and say that, it doesn't bring him back to life. It just temporarily reanimates him. He'll die again soon enough because God is the only one that can bring back life. And the alien says that. It's like, it's like, this isn't real life. We do not dabble in the works of God. Only God can give life. And it's like, why the fuck would an alien know about God?
Well, without getting too religious here, the Bible just says God created life. He didn't say where and how much. So.
Well, I know, but like if it's an alien, I have to assume that he's like from another planet. They could have a different religion. They could have a religion completely different from ours.
Well, yeah, it would stand to reason that they would. But
yeah. It seemed like weird and out of place. But according to the filmmakers, like that was something they had to put in the movie, otherwise they couldn't have the ending. So
it would have been no bueno.
Yeah, it's like, you better have some Christianity. You're not a communist, are you? But anyway, so they go and they talk and they say like, we need to go see Henry to make sure he's okay. And so they all three of them, the professor, his fiancée, and the male friend, they all decide to go and check up on Henry at a very bad time because now that he's got the brain, he's got all the bits to make his creature.
It's in the middle of a storm that he thinks is perfect for his experiment. He's like right in the middle of it, and
They come banging on his door. It's like, oh, shit, can't you people come back tomorrow? What the fuck? I'm busy. And of course they won't take no for an answer, and he can't do his work with them banging on his front door, giving him shit. So he finally lets him in and he explains what he's doing, and of course they call him crazy.
And that prompts to say, oh, you think I'm crazy? Well, come take a look at what I'm doing.
I'm making a monster. Still think I'm crazy? Now, I do have to say that in the book they specify that the reason that the monster is so large is because, like, Victor explains that, putting dead people together to make a working body is very difficult. So he had to get, like, large parts because with smaller parts it becomes exponentially more difficult because the parts are smaller.
Right.
So he made the monster large and powerful. Well, the powerful was just a byproduct for the fact of being large.
Yeah.
That was a side effect, but he made the monster large so that he could work on it and like not have any major fuck-ups. So that's why the monster is as big as it is. Now, obviously, he's not as huge as he's described in the book because you can't have like a 7 foot tall, 4 foot wide gorilla with like, I know they got Boris Karloff to play the part of the monster, and they put him like on elevated shoes, but he's still not that much bigger. He's just like an inch or two taller than any of the other actors in the scenes that he's with.
Yeah.
So he's not like this hulking monstrosity. And of course they put big clothes on him to make him look even more imposing. They can only do so much.
Yeah, but I think they did a pretty good job of it. He even, though he's not much taller, he still has an imposing presence.
Yeah, like the big padded shoulders, the big thick arms. the elevated shoes, and I think they even like made his head a little bit taller on the top because they give him like that flat head top to make it look like his head is like a trash can lid that they just kind of popped open, put the brain in, and stitched shut.
Yeah,
you can see the big metal staples on his skull where like they popped his brain in. So like the three of them are there watching as like he like tells his professors like, oh, it's like you taught me about violet light and ultraviolet light, but I found another extreme form of light that is the light that's the source of all life. And I'm thinking, okay, so apparently the lightning has nothing to do with it. It's all about like a higher light spectrum than ultraviolet.
Right, but hey, we need a storm for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I guess he needs the electricity of the storm to get the power he needs to reach this like last level of light. Maybe,
yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, as you can probably guess from like all the clips and shit that you people probably inevitably seen. Lightning storm comes, arm moves, he screams, it's alive.
Yep.
So so his friend and his fiance head back home. Now they got to deal with his father, who's just the biggest asshole. His father is this complete asshole who just like steps over other people's lines, is just going on berating everyone and complaining, and just has no tolerance for anyone or anything. And like even at this point, like the fiance and the friend are saying like, look, it's okay, he's just busy, and he's like, oh, stuff and nonsense.
He's with another woman.
It's like, I'll find out if he's another woman. I don't know how he could do this to you. I don't know how he could do this to me, because I'm so goddamn important. I'm a baron. You don't fuck with a baron. I'm gonna go yell at him. So the professor stays with Frankenstein, and like the professor is like, your experiment's evil. You used an evil brain. Blah blah blah, and rant, bitch, 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 moan, moan, moan. And Frankenstein's like, he's been alive for 2 days. Like, let the brain develop or something. And it's at this point that we really realize that the brain doesn't really have anything to do with it. Normal brain, abnormal brain. One of the main reasons I believe that the monster is so violent is because we find out that Fritz the Hunchback has been like tormenting and torturing the monster every chance he gets.
Yeah, he's it's quickly shown that the monster's afraid of fire, so
which is like a basic animalistic reaction. Well, you said that was like a basic animal reaction to fire.
Yeah, so Fritz goes down there with a torch constantly to cower him in a corner.
Yeah, and like he just loves fucking with him. I guess like when you're born a hunchback, like physically deformed and like disabled, like you just whenever you get a leg up over somebody, that you have to take it, like he's finally got someone lower on the total pole than him, so he just abuses the shit out of him. He's not just like scaring him with the torch, he's hitting him with the torch. He comes down with the bullwhip and just starts whipping him. He chains him to a wall and just whips him. It's like, it's no wonder the monster goes on a killing spree. Is like he's only been alive enough to know that fire sucks and getting whipped hurts.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could take a friendly breed of dog and, if you sit there and scare it with fire and beat it with a whip every day while it's chained to a post, it ain't going to be friendly for very long.
It's like you take a baby that's just been born and you immediately torment it with like a blowtorch and beat it with a little baby-sized bullwhip. That will not be a well-adjusted child.
Indeed.
So again, of course, like Frankenstein's like, Fritz, stop!
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for spanking your kids, but they got to do something wrong first.
And like wait for them to like not be a little bit older than 2 days.
Yeah.
The thing can't even.
Oh, this baby has colic. Bad.
It's like the thing can't even sit up under its own power. You're already whipping it. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But, and Frankenstein tries to hold back Fritz, but, like, every moment Frankenstein's not in the room, Fritz is fucking with the monster. And so, of course, the monster, like, finally, when he gets the chance, he manages to get a hold of Fritz and apparently hangs him?
Yeah, they show Fritz's body hanging. Not sure how he figured out nooses and not work.
Apparently it was a sailor's brain. It's like I figured he just sort of like grabbed Fritz by his ankles and just walloped him against the wall till his head popped like a zit. Or just like throttle him to death, which is what he seems to do to most people.
Yeah.
But no, he just like hangs him from a rafter, and so Frankenstein immediately goes to the assumption like, oh no, Victor was right. Like, the monster is evil and killed Fritz for no reason, even though I saw him tormenting the monster not but 5 minutes ago. The monster is obviously a monster that must be destroyed.
Well, he does say the line, he hated Fritz, he tortured him every chance he got, but...
Yeah, but like...
he's quick to agree that this thing is dangerous.
It's like, no shit! So, then, of course, because bad timing... Frankenstein's father, the Baron, shows up and like throwing his weight around, and it's probably his bitching can be heard from miles off. You got advance warning.
Quit playing with your little mistress and marry your real wife.
It's so weird and like almost comical, but like so Henry agrees to go back home, and Victor agrees that he'll go ahead and dispose of the monster. So they use a knockout drug and a needle. They inject it in the monster and knocks the monster out. So Henry Frankenstein goes back with his father, the Baron, and his fiancée and his friend. They go back home, and then once again, because like no one's as they seem, like you see that the monster's on the table, and it looks like that Victor, the professor, is going to like take him apart, but then he writes in a note that he plans on dissecting the monster to learn about like how he was created, showing that yes, he plans on stabbing Henry in the back and like learning the secret of like how Henry brought him to life, because well, we can't trust anyone, it seems, not our hunchbacks and not our professors. And of course he's dicking around too long before he does the dissection that the monster wakes up and strangles him to death. So then we cut to like the day of the wedding, and like everyone's like ready and everyone's partying. The whole town is like celebrating because the Baron's son's getting married. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, the monster's long since broken free, and he's wandering the countryside. And you get another famous scene.
Yeah, I remember this one being lampooned by Twix. There was a commercial where, the girl gives him the flower, and then he breaks out a Twix bar, and he eats one of them, and she's like, if you have two of something, you should share. And you were to make a vote whether he was going to share his Twix or not, and the end result was he wasn't going to share his Twix. So when she's saying, if you have two of something, you should share, he tears off one of his arms and gives it to her.
I think I remember that one. So again, you see this little girl on a farm, and like her father goes for a moment. It's like a farm, and like 5 feet to the right of their front door is like a lake, and it looks like they actually filmed this in an area with a lake, because it might have been just like some water and like a matte painting in the background, but it does look like it's outdoors, and it does look like it's an actual fucking lake with some mountains in the background.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. But anyway.
Actually, they did a pretty good job on the backdrops. It can be hard to tell which ones are fake and which ones are real.
Some of them are pretty obvious. Like, there's a scene later in the movie where they're chasing the monster, and like you can see
the curtain's actually like curled. And
yeah, you can easily see the curtain lines in like the backdrop, and you can tell that it's just like a fabric backdrop with like clouds and shit painted on it. It's like, but oh well, it was 1931. Like the fact that the movie made noise was probably like astounding to people at the time as it was.
Yeah.
Much less all the other special effects, which were pretty good for their time. So anyway, so you see the little girl there, and of course Frankenstein like wanders up, and like once again like he sees her and he doesn't react badly. He's like, oh, there's this little girl, and he's curious, and so she tries to be friends with him. She takes him down to the side of the pond or the lake, and like she shows him the flowers, and he smells the flowers, and he likes the way they smell. And so she shows him, like, she takes the flower heads off and she throws them in the water and they float. Well, Frankenstein does the same thing, finds this absolutely enthralling, but he runs out of flowers. So he looks at her, and being that he's an imbecile who's only been alive for, 3 days at this point?
Something like that.
Yeah, like he's like, oh, well, like, pretty things float. This little girl's pretty. I bet she'll float too. And so he just scoops her up and just tosses her ass into the water. And of course she can't swim, even though the water looks like it's maybe like 3 feet deep at most. And she just flops around and just immediately drowns. And Frankenstein, like, he looks around and is like, oh, I think this is bad. I better go. Yeah, first he's like, like he's expecting her to come out. Like he's motioning like, you're going to come out, right? You're going to come out, right? Of course she doesn't. So he's like, oh, fuck, I need to get out of here.
Yeah, now, you were telling me about this. Supposedly there's a deleted scene where he actually goes into the water and scoops her out and is upset because she's not moving.
Yes, I've seen a clip, I think I saw a clip where it shows that it's supposed to be, the scene fades out at the same time, like, but rather than the monster, like, running away, it shows the monster there, like, waiting for her to get out of the lake. It's like, obviously you're supposed to float. Why the fuck aren't you floating? Yeah. The flowers did it, why can't you? What's your problem? And then it does a cut to, like, the monster looking incredibly sad, holding the drowned little girl, carrying her into her home, and then placing her like on the bed and kind of looking sad, and like kind of like slumping his shoulders and walking out, leaving her there where she's eventually discovered by her father. But I'm thinking, it's like the only thing I can think of is like, how fucking convenient is that? She lives in a house that's not 5 feet from a large body of water, and of course she doesn't know how to swim. Because why would she? She's 5 feet away from something that will kill her if she falls into it. Of course she doesn't know how to swim. That's just dumb. I mean, it makes sense for the movie, but it's dumb. If she's that close to the fucking lake, she should know how to swim. It's not like their father's like, don't worry, my daughter, I'll teach you to swim tomorrow. It's like, oh, if only I taught her today and not put it off until tomorrow, she might have lived.
Yeah, and also just like, the monster doesn't toss her very far in there.
Yeah, like he tosses her like 3 feet into the lake, so like that...
She should have been able to stand up, but...
It's like, it looks, yeah, it's like she should have been able to stand up, but I mean, it's like, it's not like it's a fucking, like body of water in like a mined out quarry where it's just a sheer drop down. It's like it's gotta like go gradually deeper.
Yeah, but
a fucking continental shelf.
But it's a small criticism.
So yeah, we go back to the wedding, and like, oh, now the fiancée, she's in her like wedding gown, but she starts freaking out. Oh, I've had a terrible vision. I see a dark shape coming between us. I don't know what I would do without you, Henry. Oh, I'm so scared. And of course it's like, oh, you and your womanly emotions. Don't worry, it's just your nerves. It's our wedding day. There's nothing to be afraid of. And of course, like, word gets to them that, like, someone went to the old, like, tower and found that Victor had been killed. And then, in a really good scene, I gotta say, you see the farmer walk into town holding the dead body of his drowned daughter. And the look on his face.
Yeah, just like a 1,000-mile stare.
Yeah, he's got, the 1,000-yard stare. He's got that look on his face, just the distraught, completely dejected look on his face. And he does a good job. He just walks like a fucking zombie holding his kid. Like, through the town. And you see, like...
Now, I don't know if the kid was a prop or a real girl, but...
I think she was just, like... It looked like it was a real girl. Like, she was just,
it looked
like,
real to me, yeah.
And, like, he's walking in a way, like, so disjointed that if she was breathing, you wouldn't have seen her chest going up and down anyway.
Yeah.
He's just, like, he's kind of
bouncing around. She did a really good job of, like, limping out if it was her.
Well, kids know how to go ragdoll. You take them somewhere they don't want to go, what's the first thing they do? They go, like, all dead weight on you. I've seen it happen 1,000 times at the funeral home.
Yeah.
A woman tries to pick up her kid, and the kid just becomes a sack of mashed potatoes. But, so, like, yeah, he walks, and you see is, like, all the people in town celebrating, and then they see this guy, and they all kind of stop. And, like, eventually, like, he goes through the town, and eventually, like, there's a mob that starts following him because they realize something's wrong. So they go to the burgomaster, who's, like, this wispy-haired fat guy who... He's got to be related to the Undertaker.
That's my brother Lou. Couldn't find anything else for him.
So we just made him the town undertaker / drunk. So he takes it's like the burgomaster comes up. He's like, "Why have you brought your daughter here?" He's like, "She drowned." It's like, "Well, why'd you bring her to me?" He's like, "She's been murdered." It's like, "Oh, okay, I'll just take your fucking word for it." And like, what has to be like the biggest jump to conclusions I've seen in a long time. Like, oh, I found my daughter drowned. Obviously, she's been murdered, even though I didn't see it and I have no evidence of this.
Well, like if they had kept the scene in where the monster takes the girl to the house.
And like maybe also had like the father sees him leaving the house and like runs in and sees his daughter dead in the house. Yeah. Then it puts 2 and 2 together, because then you'd also have an idea. Because like they know it's like, oh, so we're going to find the killer and bring him to justice. It's like, they don't know who did it. They don't even know if she was murdered or if she just drowned of her own volition. But it's like, yeah, there's a murderer about, so let's go get him. So they form a lynch mob.
Yeah. They get that lynch mob together real quick, too.
Yeah. It's like there's just like an abundance of like clubs and torches, like, like laying about for just such occasions. We keep a bunch of unlit torches nearby just in case we need to form a lynch mob. And it's fucked up. It's like, I mean, I gotta wonder, like, if this is like a sign of the times, as this is like explains why they say don't go to towns where they don't know you. Because, hey, someone dies, they assume it's a murder, they form a lynch mob to find the killer, air quotes, and guess what? You're the only person there that they don't recognize, therefore you must be the killer. Yeah. I mean, like, if you were a serial killer in those times and you wanted to get away with murder, you just wait until you saw, like, a stranger passing through town. You just kill some random person. You'd be like, oh, there's a murderer. It must be the only person we don't know. Get him. Yeah. So they form this lynch mob.
And if you're the quickest enough, you get to do a second murder.
It's like they form a lynch mob to get somebody. And, like, at this point, Victor, the fiance and his friend who's acting as the best man for the wedding.
Oh, you mean Henry, not Victor.
Yeah, Henry, not Victor. Henry Frankenstein, his friend who's acting as the best man, and his spouse are the only ones that know that Henry made a monster. They're the only ones that know this. None of the townspeople know that there's a monster. They just know that, like, there's a little girl that died and was probably murdered. So Henry, of course, knows that the monster must have gotten loose and the monster must have been the one that did it, so they go looking. Of course, he locks his hysterical fiancée in her room while they go looking for the monster. And, of course, where does the monster show up? Through her fucking bedroom window, and she's locked in there with him and she can't get out. So, of course, the monster attacked her, and I expected her to get killed, but she didn't. Like I said, I hadn't seen this movie. She just faints, and the monster just, like, fucking wanders off. And so Henry is convinced that the monster needs to be stopped. He made my fiancé faint. He must be stopped before he makes someone else faint. And so, like, he joins the lynch mob. He's like, yeah, let's get the killer that I had nothing to do with. And so, like, yeah, they go looking, and you see, like, a couple other people get attacked by the monster as the monster, like ambushes them, picks them off. Though it doesn't look like they get killed, they just look like they get strangled into unconsciousness because they're, like, moaning and, like, on the ground when they're found.
Yeah.
And then, like, Victor, of course, gets jumped because he gets separated from his, like, branch of the lynch mob. The monster, like, attacks him and strangles him into unconsciousness. For some reason, carries him off, like, to this old windmill. Then you get the famous scene. Like, the monster goes into the windmill where, like, a giant log conveniently, like, braces the door shut. And he carries Henry Frankenstein up to the top floor where he goes out to the balcony and starts, like, harassing the villagers, like, growling at him and shit.
Yeah.
And then, like, when Henry wakes up, the monster starts growling at him and then, like, starts beating him up and strangling him, like, on the balcony for all the villagers to see. And then, like, he throws... obviously, it's like a straw dummy made to look like Henry, and he throws.
But it wasn't bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it looked pretty. It looked pretty bad, not in the sense that it looked fake, But it looked like if this was a real person, this shit would have really fucked
Oh
up.
yeah, like he would have been ruined.
That's a good way to put it.
The way he hits the windmill blade, his guts would have just exploded.
Yeah, like you see him pick up. You see him pick up Henry Frankenstein above his head, the monster, mind you, and from the top floor balcony, he throws Victor down in a gorilla press throw. If you know what a gorilla press is, it's like where you lift someone completely up above your head, kind of like how Donkey Kong lifts up the barrels before he throws them. And he throws Henry down, and Henry, rather than landing all the way down, he hits one of the blades of the windmill and collapses on it backwards, in a way that would have just destroyed his spine.
Yeah.
And then
his kidneys and spine would have just fucking exploded.
And then as the windmill blade keeps turning, he eventually falls down in the ground.
Right, he doesn't get to fall off the windmill blade until it's at an angle that he can slop off like the dead meat he should have been.
Granted it's a straw dummy, but it looks pretty bad because if this was a person, that would have sucked. And so, he lands, and so, the villagers, carry him off back to the castle. And so then the villagers, they set the windmill on fire, and it's kind of a sad scene a little bit, because, the monster, when he growls, it's, kind of like a stuff, but, when he's in, the windmill, when it's completely engulfed in flame, he's not growling anymore. He's just straight up screaming.
Yeah, and they do a really good job with the debris and falling effects in there.
It was when he screams, he's like ah, ah, and it's that's kind of haunting, because that's the kind of sound you'd expect someone
scared child. Yeah,
like a scared child, not just a scared child, but a scared child slowly burning to death. And they do this bit where a flaming beam lands on him, and I saw how they did it. Essentially, they lowered it onto his back and had him hit on the floor, but they sped up the frames of the film so that rather than it being lowered onto him, it looks like it just lands on him. But for the movie, it works really well.
Yeah, for the time, it's a good special effect.
Yeah. And so it looks like just a big heavy beam lands on him, and he's just screaming his fucking head off as he's just surrounded by flame, and it just shows the entire building in flame. It's it's a really fucked up shot when you think about it. It's like I said before, take out the bit about the abnormal brain. It's still someone that for the entire new life
he hasn't been around for a week.
Yeah, he hasn't even been around for a week. All he's known is darkness, fire, burning him, and pain from a bullwhip, being tortured by a hunchback, being chased by angry people. And now he's on fire.
Yeah, the only good that he found, he accidentally killed.
Well, because
he didn't understand.
The girl didn't swim. Why didn't she swim?
Yeah.
You live next to a house, you should be able to you live next to a lake, you should know how to fucking swim.
You live next to a house, you should be able to swim.
Well, that's my dyslexia for you. But and then but after that, for kind of a happy ending, it cuts back to the castle. I'm guessing a couple of days later, you see Henry Frankenstein on a bed, his fiancée next to him. They realize that the wedding didn't go on, but Henry's alive. I don't know about okay, but he's alive. And his father's oh, he just needs some time to recover, and they kind of ended on that. So it's yay, he's not dead. And he's still going to get married eventually. He may be crippled for the rest of his life. But at least he's not dead.
Due to abnormal monster chucking windmill blade spinal corrosion.
But so they kind of leave it on a bit of a happy note like that. I guess because most movies had to have some sort of bright note at the end of them.
Yeah.
But one thing I forgot to mention, at the very beginning of the movie, they show this gaunt individual walk out from behind a curtain, and he's all dressed up.
Oh yeah, that's.
And he's you're about to see a story based on the tales of Dr. Frankenstein and his creature and his experiments. It's this story may tantalize you, it may frighten you, it may horror you. If you're not prepared, well, you've been warned. And I've seen that lampoon so many times and used in other things. Frank Castle must have loved that shit when he was a kid, Because apparently, like in the 50s and 60s, those Castle movies, they used to always have some shit like that. Like sometimes, like Castle himself would come out in the film, and like in the beginning and say like, "Oh, it's like be sure to sign this thing that says that the filmmakers are not responsible if you die of a heart attack from fright while watching the movie." And they did like stuff like that in other movies, and while it's not a horror movie, they do a bit like that in the Ten Commandments, where like some guy comes out from behind the curtain and says like, "Hey, this is the kind of movie you're gonna watch." Blah blah blah. They even spoofed it in El Super Beasto. Like in the beginning of the movie, they have like a black and white shot with like this gaunt individual. It looks like a caricature of this one, explaining how this movie is going to like frighten you and blah blah blah, and you've been warned. And they also did it in Ed Wood. Like they have that one character come out and says like, "Oh, this is the tale of the life and story of the film director Ed Wood." It's an interesting little touch on it. So, what'd you think of the movie, all in all?
I was impressed with it. Like I said, for me it was basically like seeing it for the first time because it just had been so long, and I think it still holds up today, which is really impressive. It being a product of its time, and I'm glad about the set. I'm looking forward to the other 4 films.
So yeah. Having seen it for the first time myself, or like all together, I mean, I'm glad that I finally got to see it. It is a classic movie. You can tell that this is it was a groundbreaking movie. A lot of the tropes that we see nowadays that have been done 1,000 times started here. Like the guy walking out and like warning the viewers. The scientist getting pissed off when someone calls him mad and doing like, "You think of me mad? I'll show you how mad I am." The hunchback assistant. The grave robbing ghoul for experiments.
Yeah.
A lot of the spooky scenery and stuff. The old laboratory with all the Jacob's ladder and like.
Oh, speaking of which, the laboratory, the effects on there with the electricity and the fire, they're fucking amazing for that time.
It's like, yeah, I'm wondering how many like key grips and set designers died from electrical shock.
No kidding.
Because like it's like we took all these electrical equipment and just like took off all the safety and like electrical insulation off of it and just like plugged it into a fucking dynamo and watched it go.
Right, we decided to see what would happen if you take 1,000 light bulbs without the glass and just turned them all on. It looks great.
Oh yeah, it is some great shit.
You like see these sparks of electricity riding up the Jacob's ladder and then just like bursting into quick flames before the next electricity volt runs up and bursts into flames.
Yeah, it's like when James Rolfe was mentioning like the special like the laboratory scene. I can see why he was so entranced by it. It's like I want some of that shit for my room. I want just a big ass Jacob's ladder I can just turn on whenever I'm feeling bored. I'm bored. Turn on the electrical entertainment device. The TV? No, the Jacob's ladder. I could sit there and watch that thing for a while before I get bored of that.
Right. Anybody got some bugs I could let loose?
There's a mosquito in my room. Time to turn on the torch. Watch that sucker just burst when it gets too close to that thing.
It's no longer alive. It's no longer alive.
Yeah, fuck that mosquito. We haven't posted like our rant on mosquitoes, but
you're gonna love that one, audience.
Well, we're almost 54 minutes into it. Tell you what, how about we split this into 2 episodes and I'll just post them side by side. And we'll talk about the second movie in another episode, and we'll just do a quick bookend. I'll post these 2 side by side, but I've been told that you're supposed to keep the videos an hour. No one listens to these things when it's over an hour. So fine, whatever. We'll do 2 episodes here.
All right.
We'll go ahead and stop here. And we're going to continue in just a second. But in the meantime, if you don't have time to watch the next one yet, come back to it. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, leave your comments, give us some ideas on what to talk about or what to watch and talk about. In the meantime,
stay tuned for Bride of Frankenstein.
Yep, we'll be right back. Stay fat and angry.